Assalamu alaikum. My name is Fadwa Wazwaz, and I'm about to end the theme of nurture thyself, growing the Moses within. The coming theme, as I said, will be the beauty of faith beyond placebo joy and the tactics of Satan. As I end this theme, I thought I would look at two posts in the past, because it sums up like what happens if we don't go on the journey of turning to God. First of all, you're not turning to your ego, to nurture yourself and then grow, you might say, the characteristics of Moses and the prophets within. What can happen is you can turn to your ego or turn to your crowd, which again seeks, if you will, knowledge, understanding of right and wrong from the ego. It's going to absorb what's around it and within it, but it's never going to make connection to God, seeking his bounty and his grace, seeking the faith, as I mentioned in the previous video. And it's going to come to this point, and I used a post by Jewish Voice for Peace. Again, you have to know what it is you are fighting. So, because I am Palestinian and also Muslim, you want to make sure that you understand the situation and you're sensitive to the situation that we are in, particularly groups that are trying to pit Jews against Muslims, Palestinians against Jews, and same, not to be in denial that Palestinians are facing oppression and persecution by Zionist Jews from Israel, as well as those who support blindly and uncritically the state of Israel, whether they be Christian or Jewish Zionists or Zionists in general. So to do that, it helps at times to look for voices that understand that our aim and our target is a mindset, a soul, a spirit that seeks to dominate, as I mentioned before, seeks to control, seeks to subjugate others, it seeks to arrogate oneself. A lot of times, people, if you listen on the situation, they sometimes harm themselves by continually talking about how the oppressor sees the oppressed as not human. I don't like to reference this perception because the perception is not, pushes kind of the oppressed into then going through all these gymnastics, if you will, to try to impress and win over the oppressors. Like, we're like you, we do this, we're like you, we do this, look at women do this, look, so it's a way of saying, look at me, pick me, I'm like you, because they keep, through the psychology of oppression, trying to make them feel low, down, minor, a list of 1,001 things that they want to keep the oppressed down. But the reality is, if we listen to the Quran, and there are other, in fact, teachers that mentioned this, and I mentioned this also earlier, that, for example, Malcolm X said that abuse of power, he said, respects power. And I mentioned abuse of power respects power. It means it does not listen, it has a hatred, an aversion, an allergic reaction to weakness. So when Moses came to speak to the Pharaoh, he came as a weak person, Obviously, he was protected by God, but he came in a state of weakness. He only had his brother Harun with him. And Jesus, upon them peace, came also to speak and spread the message, even with his mother, Maryam, upon her peace. They came in a state of weakness. They were not like the ones with power and prestige. I mentioned that case with Prophet Solomon, upon his peace, but how healthy power treats power. Again, that is not abusive, but it's also healthy. That interchange of power. So those type of stories are in the Quran to help us understand that our aim and our target is, again, I mention it over and over again, it's that alternative reality. It's that mindset, like how I say dhikr reshapes our brain. Likewise, certain things that a person can say or do or think, it can also shape a reality in their mind that puts them in a state of arrogance or a pharaoh-like mentality where they're speaking, but you, as I will show, they cannot listen. So they cannot grow. They assume they're growing because they're getting more land, they're dominating more, they're killing more. And so they see that as a sign of their growth, of their power. But in reality, if one looks at it from the lens of faith, they're actually descending to the lowest of the low of human consciousness. So to get to the point, so I don't make this a long video, if you look at this was around August 29, 2018. It was on Twitter. This is Netanyahu. Push this down a bit. These are the words of Netanyahu. So this is Jewish Voice for Peace. Again, and our aim is this. Our target is this. We could listen to this, his words expressed openly on, at the time it's called Twitter. The weak crumble. So we can understand what's going on in Gaza by reflecting even not just what they were saying before Gaza, before October 7th, but again, throughout history, when the state of Israel was being formed and promoted to be created, what were their words? Again, it sounds very, very, very much like the logic, the words, the mindset, the spirit, the soul of oppressors. Those identifying the Quran or even at a historical context. Those that some of us recognized, factually correct. If for strong, you substitute equipped with more weapons than your adversary during World War II. They had no guns and were exterminated. Now some Jews have guns and intend never to suffer the same fate again. So far, so good. But then comes the nation building, the land grab, the cruelty to your fellow man, Zionism in a word. So that can never be justified. So as you could see, what I mean by turning to God versus turning the ego or turning to those who oppressed you for acceptance. As you could see, you start to adopt their way. So this is just some of the commentary from those who follow, for example. And I'm making an assumption here, most of them, a good number of them are Jews. But that's exactly what he's doing to Palestinians. Violence are the weak man's tool. The strong lifts people, the weak oppresses. Again, this is kind of what a certain little Austrian with a funny mustache used to say in the 1930s. So you could see this 390 comments. The date of this is Prime Minister of Israel, Israeli PM, and it was August 29, 2018. I'm asking you to look to see the commentary from Jews who do not adopt this. Try to look at Jewish Voice for Peace, and the date is September 1, 2018. And look for this post in the comments right here. So our target is this mindset. This is our target. This is why I came very, very upset with Kamala Harris when she comes up with, we're going to make the United States the most lethal weapon in the world. It comes again with this mindset. Weak will crumble, they're slaughtered, erased from history. Maybe she didn't use those words, but again, you could see how when you take money from AIPAC, when you turn to these, again, supposedly strong people, but no principles, no ethics, no morals, you adopt their ways, you adopt their psychology, you adopt their vision, you adopt how they see the world. So they'll be erased from history. The strong, for good or for ill, will survive. The strong are respected, and the alliances are made with the strong. And in the end, peace is made with the strong. So you could see what is taking place in this psychology. This also existed, the same situation existed during the time of Prophet Muhammad, upon him peace and blessings. So it isn't just, again, this mindset is of Hitler or Prime Minister Netanyahu. It's the mindset of all oppressors, all abusers. And this is where I'm taking you into a verse from the Quran, and I'll give you some scholarly commentary. There are others, but just brief. I encourage you to actually look at a few other scholarly commentaries just on these verses. This is chapter 11. I should have put chapter 11. This is my fault. It's verses 91 to 93. So again, there are people during that time that were in power, and they also have the same mindset, not maybe using the exact same words, but as you'll read, they have the same mindset. Very similar to, again, Kamala Harris, we're going to be the most lethal weapon in the world. So you see that here. This is an exchange, this junction point where God shows us the weak facing those who are given power, and they're tested with power. So we have to use the right language and framing so that we don't develop an awe of them in our hearts. We don't look up to them, and we don't try to impress them. And we don't try to mold ourselves. And this is where you get the 50 shades of whatever, you got 50 shades of this mindset, of this soul, So, and then they start clapping oh, now we got a Kamala Harris who's doing, a woman now that thinks like this. We got a Black person that thinks like this. We got a Jew that thinks like this. And they're celebrating diversity, and you're thinking, that's not diversity. You're celebrating being a Pharaoh. You're celebrating 50 shades of Pharaoh. You're not celebrating diversity. There is no diversity of mind. There is no growth. There is no developing ethics, principles, values that allow the weak to be heard, to gain their rights, to get protection before the law. We don't see that. And so we're just happy that we have 50 shades of oppression, of the mindset of oppression, of the soul, the spirit of oppression. So the junction point that I'm bringing, there is more than one ways that the Quran looks at this, but I'm pointing at this one. It came at the same time as I was reflecting on this. They said, "Oh, Shu'ayb is a prophet. We don't understand much of what you say." And I'd like to kind of highlight this. And this is because they're always speaking, they never listen. They're always the ones who are speaking, and they never, ever try to listen to understand how their actions, their words, their behavior impact others in a negative way. So it's not because they think others are not human, it's because they think they're gods, that they don't have to listen to others. They don't see power as a responsibility. They see power as an entitlement. Once you have it, you could do what you want. you can crush people. And I've showed videos, I don't want to have to keep showing them, of people like walking on grapes, giving the impression that they are going to crush Gaza. You know, the weak will crumble, are slaughtered, erased from history. So this is how they see power, right here. They have a hatred of weakness. And so this is how they see it. They don't see responsibility towards the weak. They see that they can steal, they can abuse, they can take advantage. And so they don't understand, obviously, anything what you say. Based on what? Based on how they see themselves, not how they see you, not how they see the weak, how they see themselves. They see themselves as gods. And because they see themselves as gods, and they have, by the way, a false perception of who God is, and this is why I did the let your fear of God be deeply embedded in love. And so they go even to a step further and they start signing. This is where you get the Amalek speech. And Muslims will do the same thing. Like they'll come up with these religious ethics and they'll make it appear as though it's like the word of God. You know, the thing about our faith is that the Quran is protected from being altered and changed. But if it was not protected, we would have all of these religious ethics that make, again, whatever these individuals who see themselves as gods deem acceptable, that's what will become, like they'll sign God's name to it. So we have to reflect on how abusive power thinks so we can separate, again, the words of God from the words of abusive power signing God's name. Indeed, we consider you among us weak. As I mentioned, they have a hatred of weakness. This is something to note. Whereas God turns in mercy and compassion to those who are weak, they have a hatred of weakness. Crumble them, erase them from history, makes sense to them. It makes sense to Hitler, it makes sense to Netanyahu. This is, again, 2018. Before October 7th. So the people in Gaza know what they were facing. They're facing somebody who thinks like this. They're facing a culture and a society who's been nurtured to see this as strength, as wonderful, as great, as hope. This is how they see it. And they see it as that they will gain the respect that they seek. Not in God's eyes, but in the eyes of those who oppress them. Because that's how, as I mentioned in one of the comments, that's how, during the Nazi Germany, this is how Nazis saw power and weakness. And so you could see again who they turned to gain that respect, that alliance. And if not for your family, like one of the things, like let's just say, if people could turn away, and I mentioned more than once where Netanyahu said, if the world can just turn away, when there's this world event or this world event, what would he do? He would exploit that situation, in his own words, and dispossess, as many Arabs from the land as he possibly goes. So he always looks for an opportunity where people are distracted with some worldly event to create new racist laws, new apartheid laws, new laws to, legalize land theft. Again, to erase the weak from history. Yeah. We would have stoned you to death, and you're not to us one respected. He said, "Oh, my people, is my family more respected?" He said, "Oh, my people, is my family more respected for power by you than Allah?" But you put him behind your back in neglect. Indeed, my Lord is encompassing of what you do. And O my people, work according to your position. Indeed, I am working. You are going to know whom will come a punishment that will disgrace him and who is a liar. So watch, indeed, I am with you, a watcher, awaiting the outcome. So let's look at the scholarly commentary. There it is. 1191. As I said, there are other scholars I listened to, but just to keep it brief, they didn't understand what Prophet Shu'ayb. People have a different spelling of Prophet Shu'ayb, so you could see, you'll sometimes see it like this if you're searching, and sometimes you'll see it like this. Upon him peace said to them, not because he talked to them in a foreign language or because the theme was too difficult or complicated. You know how they keep saying it's complicated. You hear it with their own tongue. It's complicated. We'll read a book. It's complicated, you know. For he talked to them in their own language, and his theme was simple and clear. But they saw themselves as gods, and they're speaking. As a matter of fact, they didn't understand because they would not understand. Their crooked thinking, again, the way they're thinking is wired because they're an alternate reality, left neither any desire nor any aptitude for understanding his talk. And we saw this at the DNC convention. No desire, no aptitude to hear Palestinians on stage explain how what they're doing is impacting Palestinians. These are not even people coming straight from Gaza, but people who are, as I heard from the uncommitted votes, these are individuals who were raised or I think born in the United States, and they were part of the state legislature. So they were very, like you could say, groomed into the system, you know, and are capable of using the language, the understanding, the themes to bring forth the understanding of what they're doing is harming Palestinians. But the issue here is again about the desire and the aptitude to understand. And we saw this, we all bore witness, they would not allow the speaker. There's no desire, no aptitude to understand what Palestinians are facing as a result of these actions that are being taken. Because they want to erase them. They said they want to erase the weak from history. This is your mindset, if this is the way you see the world, this is your worldview, do you really want to hear how your actions are impacting others? No. So they, of course, are not going to say, well, we don't want to hear what you have to say because we want to, you know, erase you from history. But they let out the truth every now and then of how they see their worldview. But they will mock those who are weak by making them feel like we don't understand what you say. And most of us probably have faced that. This is what gaslighting is about, is when you're trying to speak and then the person responds by trying to make you feel small or trying to make you feel like you're not making sense or you're mentally ill or something. Usually, like if they were honest, they could say, can you tell me more? And they would ask clarifying questions. And they would ask more clarifying questions. So try to like make an effort if they had a desire or an aptitude to understand what you say. But they're speaking. They don't want to hear what you have to say because there's no desire, aptitude to understand at all. And this is true of all those people who become slaves to their prejudices and their lusts. Again, it could be the lust for power. It's not always a lust for, again, self. It could be a lust for power. as render them incapable of accepting anything against their preconceived notions, for they are neither inclined to listen to such things nor understand them, as though these things were not for them, nor were they for them. So again, it's this mentality of they see themselves as gods. They don't need to understand. They don't want to understand. Even though I mentioned over and over again, God is the hearing and he's the all-knowing, the all-seeing. Even though he knows and he understands, he still allows us to speak and to hear ourselves speaking to him and turning to him and out. He could say, I already know. For example, I'm trying to separate how they see themselves as gods, and then they project this vision and this worldview of God onto God, which is totally, like their tyranny. A lot of times they project it on God, and then they sell that as God. And we're supposed to separate the two, because this is not how God treats people who are weak. He is all hearing, he is all seeing, he is all knowing. So even though he knows, he still wants to hear you speak to him. He wants to listen. Even though he knows, he's al-khabir, meaning that he knows the secrets of your heart that you yourself are not aware of. He still wants you to turn to him and speak to him. See the difference? While studying this part of the story of Prophet Shu'ayb, it should be kept in view that similar conditions were prevalent in Mecca. Again, 50 shades of tyranny, 50 shades of a pharaoh at the time of the revelation of the story. So again, what is it that we are fighting? Is the point I'm trying to nail it as I transition to the next theme about the beauty of faith, and then talk into about how Prophet Muhammad, upon him peace and blessings, nurtured mindsets, people who saw the world this way and treated the weak in this way, how he nurtured that society into a healthy society where principles, ethics, laws, norms, morals were part of society. The Quraysh were as bloodthirsty to kill the Prophet, upon him peace and blessings, as were the people of the Midian to take the life of Prophet Shu'ayb, upon him peace. Just as the people of Prophet Shu'ayb, upon him peace, desisted from the evil design because they were afraid of his family, likewise the Quraysh were afraid of Bani Hashim and refrained from executing their evil design. This is why, like certain people, for example, when they speak the truth, they have that acceptance that if somebody is a Palestinian like me and a Muslim, like they would crush you. They'd say, okay, I don't have to fear saying anything. For example of that would be if individuals who were in power and resigned and they left and they said, I don't want to be complicit, they spoke, they still will be threatened. They still will face threats. They'll still will be like attacked, if you will. But there is the fear of how they will be perceived by certain still power, you might say, sectors in the community. And so they take that into account, but they're always looking for the opportunity to execute them or to kill them. Like a Palestinian journalist, they'll crush them, they'll kill them, they'll erase them. But with, for example, non-Palestinian journalists, they won't allow them in, but those who try to speak up, they'll come after them with threats. And if they have a network, you might say, they might take into consideration that network, but they're still looking for the opportunity to attack them and kill them. We saw that, for example, with Assange, Julian Assange, for example, how if he was, for example, not European, but he was a Palestinian, they would have just killed him, crushed him. So this story was being related to warn the Quraysh that they should learn a lesson from the answer of Prophet Shu'ayb, upon him peace, as if to say, O people of Quraysh, this same is the answer to you from Muhammad, upon him peace and blessings. And it's the same as to say to those in Israel, this same is the answer to you. And to all the supporters of the state of Israel, this same is the answer to you. And the answer is, my people, he said, Shu'ayb, are my kinsmen mightier with you than God, that you hold the kinsmen in awe while you cast Allah behind your back? Because again, they see themselves in gods. They don't see God. They might quote him and they might say this, but they assumed that he's on their side. It's probably like their servant instead of his servant. Surely my Lord encompasses all what you do. My people, go on working according to your way, and I will keep working according to mine. Soon you will come to know who will be afflicted by a humiliating chastisement and who is proved a liar. And watch, I will also watch with you. And when our command came to pass, the appointed time as an end, and the test is over, and then the grade is given, we delivered Shu'ayb and those who shared his faith through our mercy. This is again how God looks at the weak, tells them, don't hold those who are in power, 50 shades of Pharaoh, in awe, and try to be 51 shades of Pharaoh. And a blast seized those who were engaged in wrongdoing, so they lay lifeless in their homes, as though they had never dwelt in them before. Blow away with the people of Midian, even as the Thamud, this is another group of people, same mindset, were done away with. So I can get us here. This is this one scholarly interpretation of these set of verses in chapter 11 of the Quran. As you could see, what they were plotting and planning. The weak crumble, slaughtered, erased from history, while the strong, for good or for ill, survive. Strong are respected, alliances are made with the strong, and the end peace is made with the strong. So who respects the Pharaoh now? And I mentioned that as soon as October 7th, because Jordan Peterson was up there, like defending, give him hell, you know. Again, you see that same psychology. Give him hell, crush, you know, there's no principles, no rule of law, no ethics, no morals. It's just, again, that slaves to their lusts, lust for power, lust for killing, dominating. And who has respect for Hitler now? Nobody looks up to Hitler and say, I want to be Hitler, you know. You might remove his name, but grab his thinking. Some recognize it and say, hey, that's what's very similar to what Hitler said. And they recognize it, it's wrong. Other people are just seeing, oh, this is Netanyahu, so it must not be Nazism. It must not be fascism. Because, you know, it's anti-Semitic. If I say this is something wrong with this logic, and hit the alarm bell and say, this is a red flag. So they're saying red lines, red flags. They were, you know, alarms throughout. And you didn't need to wait for October 7th to happen to hear the alarms raging. And the alarms were very loud. For a lot of us, we could see the red lines and red flags over and over and over again. And the more we ignore them, the more it will, take us again descending further and further and further until we face this situation as though they've never dwelt in them before. Away with people of Midian, even as the Thamud were done away with. So what they were plotting and planning against others is what you will face in time. Just to take you back here, I wanted to show you another video just to hear.
Gives to its military policy called full spectrum dominance, which is that the U.S. shall dominate all potential spheres of conflict, all competition across the world in all possible domains, in the sky, on the land, on the sea surface, under the sea, in cyberspace, and so on. And this has led to so many conflicts, and we see now ourselves really on the verge of potentially nuclear conflicts, which is absolutely terrifying. Remember that one nuclear-armed submarine contains the equivalent of 5,000 Hiroshima bombs. And we have 14 of these nuclear-armed submarines. And the U.S., unfortunately, dismantled 2 of our major nuclear treaties. It only takes a few of those weapons to trigger nuclear winter. It doesn't matter that it's over there. It affects us all. Just one nuclear sub would basically wipe us all out from nuclear winter. We need to back off. We need to abolish nuclear weapons altogether.
So again, the warnings, the signs are over and over and over again, how it's going to impact all of us. And it's a call for us to respond and to take this seriously. We can claim we don't understand, or we can acknowledge that we are acting in ways of complete bulldozing through, transgressing all principles, values, ethics, rule of law. And this is going to harm us all if we don't put an end to this, again, psychology, which has a negative impact. As I mentioned, it has a negative impact. So I would encourage you to reflect when you are voting the psychology, the worldview of the leader that is speaking and how they're speaking. Because if they come across like this is the issue with Kamala Harris, no different than Trump. It was like Trump in Indian, Jamaican women, shade, flavor, or you could say. But it's, again, this is the Netanyahu flavor. It's, again, that 50 shades of tyranny. And we should not be choosing for leaders like this. We should be looking for principles, values, ethics, and ways to nurture society so that all are protected. So this is going to be the last video for this theme. Under nurture thyself, growing the Moses within. Falsehood spreads through money, and truth through sacrifice. So we have to keep working, as the Prophet Shu'ayb said. Go on working because they're going to be working to their way, which is to erase the weak, dominate them, make them crumble, steal their resources. And we have to keep working according to our reality, our worldview, that there has to be principles, there has to be laws. Now notice he was threatened, not because they saw him as non-human, but they saw themselves as gods, as Prophet Shu'ayb had told them. He called them to respect the laws, respect the principles, recognize that they are not gods. He's calling them to someone, calling them into power, who has more power than them, going to be calling them to account. They didn't like that, and that's where the threats again came against Shu'ayb. Are they mightier with you than Allah? And you hold the kingsmen in awe while you cast Allah behind your back. Again, it's this total disregard for principles, ethics, rule of law, morals, norm. Truly, my Lord encompasses all what you do. So we have to keep putting these principles and laws in their face. And if they mention God, we put God in their face, that God is going to call you to account. And we have to keep working according, because they are going to keep working according to their way. And at the appointed time, God will respond the way he responds with every tyrant, every shade of tyrant of Pharaoh that came to earth before us and in our current time. I hope this was beneficial. Again, the coming theme will be on beauty of faith, beyond placebo joy and the tactics of Satan. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.